We are live, sir.
All right, everybody. This is episode 29 of the Beef and Bitcoin podcast with your hosts, Brett and CH. Today's topics, looks like we have some China news this past week. Our good friends over at Zero Hedge, we're talking about some Chinese banks and a little bit of a liquidity crisis, which is also coinciding with a report on Bitcoin from the Bank of China. So a little coincidental there. And then last but not least, our good friends over at the IMF put out a paper in April of this past year, basically as a guide on negative interest rates for dummies is pretty much the way I saw it. I read the abstract, and it's basically just a play-by-play on how to implement negative interest rates. So a lot going on, a lot in the Bitcoin world from a macro perspective. But first and foremost, man, how you doing this week?
I'm doing good, man. This whole, I'm just gonna put it straightforward. Negative rates are really dumb. I'm just gonna leave it out there. We're gonna cover it later. But I'm just sick and tired of seeing people advocate for negative rates because it's like, basically, it means any money in the bank just gets taken away from you. It's your wealth getting taken away. And it's only going to get worse if people let it continue to happen. And I feel that the people, the figureheads, the pundits, whatever in power, really don't realize the implications of what will happen if we continue to use negative rates. It basically means the people who are, the borrowers are getting paid. It's that simple. Versus the lenders. It's really stupid. It's like what?
Yeah, when I hear people, and we'll get into this, but when I do hear people kind of encourage this type of behavior, you just really have to wonder: are you thinking about this clearly? Like, it shouldn't make sense. I understand why it's happening, but it doesn't. It really doesn't make any sense. So we're completely upside down here, but which is honestly not that big of a surprise, right?
Yeah, I mean, like a perfect example is I think this week again, the whole of the Switzerland yield curve for their government bonds is now negative, and that means all the way out to the 50-year bond. So you could loan someone, say, or you could buy $100,000 worth of bonds, and you're losing money on that over 50 years. It makes no sense. Like you're taking a risk there that you should be getting paid for it. It doesn't make any sense to me. I don't get it. I just don't. But people are complacent and they're distracted.
You should be more open-minded.
You should be more open-minded. Yeah, it's like, and it makes me worried because it's like, if we get negative rates in the U.S., it's like I will not have a dime in the bank because why would I do that? It's stupid. I mean, we're already losing. We're already losing because of inflation. I don't want to lose more.
Right, precisely. All right, why don't we jump into this Chinese bank liquidity crisis here that Zero Hedge was talking about?
Yeah. And it basically says Chinese bank with 100 billion in assets is about to collapse. And back in May, there was I'm going to pronounce this so wrong, but it is the Baosheng Bank, BSB, was seized by the government, basically, the first takeover of a commercial bank since the High-End Development Bank 20 years ago. And the People's Bank of China, PBOC, panicked and injected a whopping 250 billion yuan via open market operations into the markets to add liquidity, to basically calm people down. And again, it's like we were talking about this before the podcast. It's like, when are we going to get a black swan event? And this could be it. I think we were ripe for one. And as we were talking before, it's like in 2008, and I know we've said it 100 times in this podcast, but people understand it's like the Fed, the head of the Treasury, whatever, they all met up in a weekend. I can't remember exactly, in September 2008, because on Monday the banks weren't going to open. There was going to be no loans, no nothing. That means all business dead, everything dead, like literally everything. It would have killed business completely. Besides for people using cash or whatever, and it's scary because it's like, yeah, okay, it might not get bad this week, it might not get bad next month, but like, what happens 12 months from now? Where are we going to be in July of 2020? Are we gonna, if we're gonna come off like a weekend like now, we're recording on a Sunday, and Monday morning, oh wait, banks aren't lending to each other, no one can pull out of ATMs, no one can send wires, etc. That's a huge issue, and that will completely stop our financial system, everything we do, basically.
Yeah, I was thinking about this, and we were talking about it before we started recording. What does the equivalent weekend look like? Fast forward to 2019, 2020. Um, you know, what stops working over the weekend? What's happening globally, right? So now you're seeing liquidity issues for Chinese banks, and there was a pretty long list of Chinese banks that delayed their disclosure of their 2018 annual reports, which is definitely concerning, especially considering some of them have a pretty large balance sheet, and that's very telling. That would be considered a red flag, right? You're sitting there and you have banks delaying their reporting issues, and I don't know.
Yeah, I
It
mean,
seems scary.
I'm looking at this right now, and I count 19 the big banks, and then it says at the bottom aggregate city or and whatever rural commercial banks, and it says 64,543 to be exact. So that's also very scary. But the Baoxing Bank was the one that got taken over in May, and that had 576 billion yuan in assets, and so that would put it at like an 80 what something. The conversion rates are at around like just below 7, so somewhere around $80 billion worth of assets. That's a lot of money. Bank of Jinzhou is over $100 billion. It's at 723 Chinese yuan. And these are all the banks. There's 19 if you're watching on YouTube. You can see them that haven't released their annual report. And a little bit down, you scroll down, you find out that Ernst and Young, were the auditors. There was Ernst and Young's Huaming Limited Liability Partners, and then Ernst and Young's have resigned from Jinzhou. And Jinzhou's like Hong Kong listed shares or Series H shares were, I think, frozen is the correct term in April. Like they weren't allowed to trade, and this is a big deal. Like so, if they're resigning, it's kind of similar to what's been going on with like Tesla. It's kind of similar to what's going on with Deutsche Bank when executive turnover is very high and people are leaving the company because they can see it from the inside. And the same thing you're probably seeing with Ernst and Young here. They probably see the numbers and they're like, "Fuck this, see ya." And it's scary because it might start over in China, but then it will spread just like 2008, where it spread it across the globe, and it was everyone then, and it considering how fast everything moves nowadays, it won't take long.
Right. And I think since I guess the economy is working on borrowed time, right? The whole legacy financial system is interconnected, and fiat money kind of connects them all. And you have currency wars, you have the red flags, the light warnings of potentially, rocky times ahead. And then you have Bitcoin on the other end of the spectrum. And, we talk about this all the time, but I feel like each and every week, we're just taking a couple steps back and looking at this big puzzle from a macro geopolitical standpoint. And it's like the perfect storm. And I think somebody had mentioned that Brendan Bernstein, somebody asked him if you could come up with a scenario of how the world is working that would be bullish for Bitcoin. And he was like, I can't think of a better scenario than the way things are right now. You have just money printing for decades. You have yield curves inverting, negative interest rates. You have Ernst and Young auditing, deciding to resign from this. It's just, and then you have the same thing from, as you mentioned, executive turnover from large companies. It is like we're putting together a little puzzle, and I mean it's a shitload of fun because I feel like you're watching it play out. It happens like in slow motion, but super fast at the same exact time, which is kind of weird.
Yeah, and to kind of go on your point there with the Bitcoin thing, yes, this is good for Bitcoin, but it is also bad. And when I mean it's bad, it's because what is it like? We're less than 1% of the population even owns Bitcoin or has access to it or whatever. As an access, I mean has an account set up that can buy it like tomorrow or right now. Um, the issue
Right. Like,
is
yeah.
as we've talked about before, is if the banking system stops working, well, that kills all the fiat on ramps onto Bitcoin. And if we get to a point where, big banks are like, well, we don't want people buying Bitcoin, and they just close off all routes, like they do with credit cards and other things, and certain banks don't allow you to buy Bitcoin. Things could get very interesting in that. Then how are people going to buy Bitcoin with cash through local Bitcoins or other things? That's going to be very interesting.
No, yeah, that's a good point. If you think about it, and you make the assumption, okay, there's a possibility that you're going to have banks across the globe that will deny access to the on ramps of Bitcoin, whether that be because of systemic collapse or just to stop the bleeding. It's totally possible, and I think definitely expected, which is another thing to think about because it's better to have Bitcoin before you need it, right? You're in this example, you can't buy it after the fact. Everything's already fucked. So I think that's a nod to think about that very carefully. Are you going to wait until things get really bad and then you can't get your hands on enough sats to get you through a rough patch, or do you how do you handle that, right? But it's a good point, because if things aren't going so hot, you have a very, very small minority of the population globally onboarded onto Bitcoin. Probably not the best circumstance to try to bootstrap a new money. You'd want more adoption prior to a collapse like that, to make the transition much easier. And I think the incentives will hopefully be as such that in the event of a collapse, that would be the demand will be super fucking high for Bitcoin. So people will, individuals who work at certain places will do what they can to make Bitcoin available. So hopefully that ends up playing out, and I have a feeling it will. But it's a very valid point.
Yeah, and it's just one of those things. It's like we don't realize how fragile the financial system is until you really have to look into what happened in 2008 and realize how fragile of a society we live in. Like, it's really fragile. And I know we already probably mentioned it, but if for whatever reason, it's Sunday right now, but it's Monday in other places, but if tomorrow morning for a reason banks stop lending, everything stops happening. Business, there's no more business loans. There's, wires, you name it. ATMs, people pulling out money because if people can't pull out money to go pay for things, it's a whole shit show. And I would be really curious how that affects things like Venmo, Cash App, Zelle, etc., because those are all tied in the bank system too. So there's so many things that are intermingled in this. Even like Apple Pay, shit. There's so many things. That it's really interesting. And the problem is it's inevitable because we haven't changed shit from 2008 and 2009. And it's unfortunate all we've done is the whole world said, fuck it, we're going to lever up more. And that's why we got insane real estate prices. That's why we got stocks at all-time highs. That's why the majority of the world's at low, or basically at negative rates. Everyone's basically negative rates when you talk about real rates. Because if you use the real CPI calculation from prior to 1980, the U.S. has been, the real consumer price index has been inflating at 6 to 12%, not whatever it is, like 2.5%, or whatever they say it is. And that changes the whole face of things.
Yeah, I mean, when you really think about it, the inflation rate is just way higher than it is told to us. You have inflation in medical costs, you have inflation in real estate, you have inflation in education costs, you have inflation on your meat, your eggs. I mean, everything. Even I just got my haircut this past weekend. Guy raised the price $5. It was like a decent increase, kind of out of nowhere. And that's when
what was the original price?
Well, I'm in California, so haircuts are expensive.
It's like $40.
So it was, yeah. It used to be $30, and I would give the guy a $10 tip because I'm not an asshole. and and then now it's 35, but I'm still gonna give him 40 anyway because like I've been giving you 40 this whole time. Like fuck, man, am I really gonna pay $40 or more than that for a haircut? Like
Insane.
it's
Is it
insane.
really that much?
Yeah,
That's
yeah.
insane,
Like
dude.
it's 35
I mean,
bucks. Yeah,
like
yeah.
I'm thinking about the last time I got my haircut cut here, and like you could probably get one for 15 or whatever, 20 somewhere, depending on if I usually tip like at least back home I would have like a $16 haircut and always tip like $4 or whatever.
Yeah.
But
I
here
mean,
the haircut's like 25 one place I go to, but that's just because it's more like, ooh, we're special people. I don't even know it's not.
yeah,
It's a
yeah.
barber shop, but
Right. Yeah, I mean, don't get me wrong. Yeah, hey, I understand. You got to charge what you got to charge. I'm not really complaining about it, but I don't want anybody to tell me that we don't have any inflation because it happens very quickly. It's not like the guy's been increasing his price from $30 to 31 to 32 to 33 over, every once a quarter he raises it $1. No, it happens all at once. You get the huge increase that, maybe they should have been getting over the years, and then everybody has to deal with it. I know the ribeyes that I were buying went up 10%. I mean, that's a lot. It's just $1. Well, yeah, fuck, man. Like, it's still a lot when you think about it as a percentage basis.
hmm
Um, so systems like the price mechanism gets out of whack when interest rates are manipulated, right? I mean, that's just the reality of it. And it's nice because when we talk about these things, we can identify the root cause. It's not rocket science. Like it's clearly the system of money that we're using, right? It's fiat money, it's fractional reserve banking, it's manipulation of interest rates, this boom bust cycle that's, created by ridiculous credit expansion.
yeah.
So it's not a mystery. What is a mystery is how does it end? You have these boom and bust cycles roughly every decade, for the last 4 or 5, give
Yeah.
or take. So it's like now we're getting close to like the end of that rubber band. At least it's felt like that for the last year
Oh
for
my
me.
God. Yeah.
Like
I've
I've been waiting like every week. I'm like, here we go, and then
Well,
it
December
just never
December was
happens.
over. I thought we were done in December. I was like, well,
So
fuck.
did I.
I was
So
like,
did I.
well, that's it. I was like, everything is falling off a cliff right now. Like it was in Bitcoin perfectly mirrored. You know, again, we talk about did Bitcoin pump because of more liquidity be driven in the system because we went from 3K to 14K and we the Bank of China basically injected the system. Was it just under $1 trillion, something like that, in
Yep.
fucking December? That's what saved the market. That's the reason stocks globally bounced there because like everything was shitting the bed and it literally looked like it was over. And I remember I was 'cause I was very active in the markets and I was watching every day, like we that Christmas Eve like half day of trading. Holy shit!
Yep.
It was like
I
wow.
remember.
I was like wow, that's it. I was like we opened up from the 26th, we went lower, and then everything bounced. I mean everything bounced, and I get it. Like we were super oversold, but everything bounced, and then it was just unrelenting from there. I mean we've had one of the greatest melt ups I've ever seen, bar none. It'll be interesting to see. The hard thing is stocks will continue to go up. And actually, this is a pretty interesting from what I've read. You want to be in stocks when there's hyperinflation. Like when I've been reading about like the Weimar Republic, like stocks went ridiculous because people are putting money and people are just able to buy stocks and the prices just keep going up. Obviously, on that flip side too, consumer prices are going up. The price of bread, the price of meat, the price of eggs, butter, cheese, etc. is going up. And we see it at the grocery store. The grocery store is the biggest, great example. Like you buy two things at the grocery store, it's like shit, $10 at least. Like you can't go buy.
Right.
If I go buy eggs and bacon, just like a pack of bacon and eggs, it's like $7 and the eggs are pretty cheap. But if there's a dozen eggs, that's not that much for me because I eat a lot. But the point is you really can't not spend at the grocery store. Like even like, and I don't eat cereal anymore, but like you look at a box of cereal, it's like $5. It's like what the hell?
Yeah, right. It's not like it's not like that's cheap anymore.
Yeah, no.
And yeah,
And then you think of,
it's
well, I don't mean to cut you off, but you think about people who work in the U.S. and like minimum wage at $7.50 or wherever it is, depending on where you live. If you're working at $7.50, okay, you have to work, 45 minutes to be able to buy a box of cereal.
yeah, it sucks.
It is pretty crazy. Um, should we jump into that Bank of China BTC report from here? Nice little transition.
Yeah. I think it's it's a little coincidental. Um, the Bank of China posted a somewhat of a bullish article or report on Bitcoin, and while it's obviously I can't read the entire thing from
I
from
think
going
I
through.
think you said this the other day, and I could not. I was just like, I gave up. Like I opened it up, and I was like, okay, it's all in
Yeah,
Chinese.
according to going through some of the thread, it seems like it was giving an explainer on why the price is going up, some of the things that make it valuable, and that now you have the federal, the chairman of the Fed, you have Powell saying, it's a speculative store of value,
Yo,
100% correct.
our boy Justin Sun made it. Look at him,
It's a joke.
dude. Apparently, he like got sick and disappeared for a few weeks or whatever. I was
Yeah,
reading
he
something like,
canceled his lunch with Warren, and then he live streamed that he was in San Francisco, and Tron like pumped like crazy, and yeah, the whole thing's a mess. People love shitcoins, but yeah. So now you have Bank of China putting out a positive report. The fact that they're putting out a report at all, I think, is good news, and that's actually one of the things I was thinking about today was just how they say, any press is good press. That is 100% the case for Bitcoin, um, especially when you have the Bank of China, who you would assume would not take very kindly to Bitcoin, and hasn't historically with banning it and so forth. But that's an interesting report because if they understand it and can see why it's valuable, I think it could be a new lever for them to pull in the currency wars that we're kind of seeing now. So if you're China and you want to take advantage of the next, government debt is just out of control. If you want to make your way out of this, um, do you hedge into Bitcoin and not tell anybody? I mean, if it were me, I'd say, yeah, fuck, of course. Maybe they've been mining um, a few percent of the coins for the last couple of years solo. I mean, there's no way to know. Mining's anonymous. We will never know. Um, but do you think that we're going to see, as the currency wars continue, countries start using Bitcoin kind of as a weapon in these currency wars?
that's a good question. I mean, um, we always forget war changes in general, and obviously economic warfare is a huge part of what the U.S. does today, and other countries do obviously too. But the U.S. dominates it because we wield the dollar, which is the best weapon ever, really.
Right.
It just crushes countries, but it's just it's so much different because technology has changed the whole perspective of warfare now. It's who can shut down whose energy grid, and
Right.
I mean, because that's
Right.
what everything is. Like, oh, well, if that country's computers don't work, their whole battle plan's effed. I mean,
No. It's true. So I think that Bitcoin changes the equation a bit because the greatest weapon that one one group has is starting to maybe lose its power a little bit, right? I mean, you have uh, not everybody wants to trade oil in dollars, right? And we're seeing that. I wouldn't be surprised if you start to see, more base currencies being used with oil. I mean, that makes sense. And the reserve status of the dollar is going away slowly but surely. So how do you transition yourself to take advantage of a move to the next reserve currency, I guess, is the best way that you can put it, right? Because while I think it's going to be Bitcoin, it could be anything. So how do you adapt? And when you see reports like this, it's like, well, clearly you get it enough to put out the report. Um, I think it just changes the equation a bit.
yeah, it really is a different thing. Like, um, if the U.S. And obviously U.S. and China are on a level collision course here. It's just a rising power challenging the status quo power. how it turns out, it's probably eventually ends in some sort of bloodshed. I don't think we're past it. I think people think we're past it, but we're not. There's still a lot of wars going on in the world. It's just not as the same scale as we've seen in the past in terms of complete total. I mean, well, there still is total destruction of a lot of cities in the Middle East and other areas in Africa, but like World War I, World War II style, where leading into World War I, people just never thought that could happen. And I think we've been kind of living in this, not dystopia, but this kind of utopia where we haven't had any serious, you know, uh, intervention in our lives, especially in the U.S., like due to outside forces, if that makes any sense.
No, yeah. I mean, I definitely get it. And I think it's, it, I don't know. I have this weird optimism that if you think about money just as a product and a technology, no different than a smartphone or, refrigeration or electricity or the printing press or the internet, like that 0 to 1 innovation, that game fucking changing innovation, things got better after the fact. It's a good thing that we have plumbing. It's a good thing that we have refrigeration. It's a good thing that we have vaccines, the internet, electricity, all that stuff. And when you think about Bitcoin as a technology like that, while the transition to a new technology might not be perfect for everyone, in the long term, it's very beneficial for human civilization. It's like I think I heard Trace Mayer say it's like a once in a species event, which kind of blew my mind. That was like a very powerful statement when he said that. And I was like, fuck, man, like you might be right about this. Humans have designed a way to create digital scarcity, and it's set in stone. There's no way to change it. All of a sudden you have the hardest asset on the planet. And that is pretty crazy because nothing is truly scarce except Bitcoin and our time. Now you're going to be mining gold on asteroids. So that, that's done right there. If you think long term, we can always produce more of anything else but time and Bitcoin. So what kind of like ripple effect and implications does that have? And while the transition could be bumpy for some, I think for most, it won't end up being as bad, but I mean, that's the fun part. Like, that's what we're speculating on. We're going to live through it no matter what. Like, it's going to happen. You're going to see things change. They will not be the same as they were.
Yeah. I just want to live to 2100. That's all.
Yeah, dude, that would be sweet. Hey, we might.
Yeah. Considering, I mean, hopefully our healthcare system is a little better, but yeah, it'd be pretty whack. I mean,
I don't know. I'm trying to go to at least 100.
Yeah, shoot for 100. Be like what's his name? John D. Rockefeller. He died at like 99 in like 6 months or something like that, which is crazy. I mean, you think about what he lived through. I know we're getting a little off topic here, but he was born in 1839, I think, if I remember correctly, and he lived till either 1937 or 38. It was either he was born in 38 and died in 37, but like the transition his life went through from like settler living in the Midwest, so the oil boom in the 1870s post Civil War, and then obviously becoming this giant monopolist with the biggest fortune in the world. I mean, and then seeing planes and cars take off too.
Right,
and
seeing some wild shit.
I mean, in like think about TVs, movies, radio, all that for him, lights, electricity, like. And then the craziest thing to me is like, what people don't realize is like, yeah, sure, Standard Oil got broken up in whatever it was, 1913. And that day that happened, John D. Rockefeller was playing golf. He got into golf when he was older. Like this is after he was 60. There's biography. He got into golf and became a very avid golfer. And he was playing with some priest or whatever. And when he found out the news from like the telegram wire or whatever he got, or the message he got in the golf course, he told him to buy as much as he can. Told the priest buy all the stocks. So how they get split up, because it was like split what Exxon Mobil. What are the other companies? There's so many more companies I can't even think off the top of my head that were all Standard Oil that were split up. And he became infinitely much wealthier with the auto boom. I mean, it's incredible.
Right. I mean, and even the automobile, if you think the people were not happy about the transition from horse to automobile. Automobiles were too slow, they were dangerous, they were a fad. Um, you hear the same excuses about a ton of stuff. You heard it was the same thing with the internet, and you're hearing the same thing with Bitcoin, which is nice because it means there's money to be made there. It means that some people aren't um, understanding and valuing Bitcoin the way that maybe they should, which is good for you and me, right? We can sit here and speculate on it and say, oh, I'm trying to do my homework on, if I were speculating on something that was going to become money that is a good money, you can make that call and you can buy some Bitcoin and get some exposure and take advantage of people thinking it's bullshit, which is great.
Yeah, so I pulled up the picture. In 1911, the U.S. Supreme Court ruled that Standard Oil Trust must be dissolved under the Sherman Antitrust Act and split into 34 companies. And this is just showing the key companies, but it's really just split into Standard Oil of Kentucky, Standard Oil of California, New York, and that's where Standard Oil of California became Chevron in 1931. Eventually became Chevron at the end. But it's crazy how many companies acquired the Texas Oil down there. I can't think of the T stands for it. But then you got Mobil, which became ExxonMobil when those two merged in 1999. I mean, it's absolutely crazy. And then I remember seeing when I was very young the Amoco signs when I was very young, but it was acquired by BP in 1998, which makes sense why I stopped seeing them at a very young age. And then even here, Standard Oil of Ohio became Marathon. So I mean, it's really crazy. I know we're a little off topic here, but it just blows my mind. Like that, his empire was fucking massive. Pardon my language, but it was just absolutely mind-boggling.
Yeah, I mean, I think you might have people telling stories 50 years from now or 20 years from now about the Winklevoss being Bitcoin moguls. Like, oh, they got in. You know what I mean? Like you're there literally laying the plumbing and the building the railroads, building this, building that. Like it's the same. You're building the infrastructure of what was the United States, and all these businesses, assuming Bitcoin becomes humongous, you have these same families taking their shot at it and laying the groundwork and the infrastructure, which is pretty cool.
Yeah, and it's just where are we heading? I think the Winklevoss brothers did side with the Libra coin. Am I wrong on that? I feel like they were.
I'm not sure. I didn't check to see if Gemini was supporting
Libra.
Libra. I don't even think they care. They own 1% of all the Bitcoin. They're good.
They're good. I mean, speaking of this, we should just jump into negative rates because
yeah, definitely,
it's insanity. I know we covered it at the very start, but I was about to go off on a tangent, so I had to cut myself off.
Yeah.
You can talk about the paper because you read it.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't read the whole thing. I went through a couple of threads that people were talking about. I was looking at the abstract of the paper. So pretty much IMF put out a paper in April that is a guide on how to fight recessions with negative interest rates. And I wrote down a quick excerpt here from the abstract, and it says, the experience of the Great Recession and its aftermath revealed that a lower bound on interest rates can be a serious obstacle for fighting recessions. That would be zero. However, the zero lower bound is not a law of nature. It is a policy choice. The central message of this paper is that with readily available tools, a central bank can enable deep negative rates whenever needed, thus maintaining the power of monetary policy in the future to end recessions within a short time. What do you think about that?
Bullshit. That's like and I said this before. I'm just so sick and tired of hearing negative rates. It's insanity. It'd be like, okay, let's say you put $10,000 in a bank account on January 1st, and you come back a year later, and since you have negative 1% rates, you lose $100. Great, you just lost $100. Now you have 9,900, and then you have to think about that's compounding against you too. And as there's a comment from Nick Szabo you put here, and Nick Szabo, if you don't follow him on Twitter, he's a Bitcoin guy. To avoid alarming people, they suggest a boiling the frog strategy, get people used to very small negative interest rates and rental fees, which is what most of Europe, Japan has done right now, where people are used to having bonds that are negative,
Right.
0.5%, close to 1%, nothing crazy. But what happens when shit hits the fan? Because shit is going to hit the fan, no matter what. No matter what the central banks think they can do, it's just human greed, fear, and hope. It's a cycle. And, what are they going to, when shit really hits fan, we're going to see countries start to crank it up to 2, 3, 4, 5% negative? Who knows? And, I hope most people don't accept that, but, people don't really pay attention to stuff like this.
Right. I mean, this is the game plan, right? You hit them with a ton of inflation, right? And nobody complains all that much, right? People are still, not well. Some people are rioting in the streets, but they didn't say it was because of inflation. You do that, right? So that's the hidden tax that nobody sees. The economy's still being propped up. Okay, what next? And you go with this boil the frog strategy where you just little by little, right? Now you had negative rates start happening. Nobody said anything. They made a good case for it. They tried to tell you why it was fine, why it's not out of the ordinary, blah blah blah. And then you have this paper come out that is giving that guide on how to cut rates to basically try to save your economy and fight the recession. And if you think about 2008, the last rate cut, like it didn't work, right? They didn't do it in time or for whatever reason. So the timing is eerily similar, right? We're about to see another cut here within the next couple of months, I'm assuming. Does that end up being the trigger, or will this cycle elongate where it's going to take more than one cut towards the end of the line here to send this thing kind of running? But you think that Japan has been pumping their own stock market by literally buying it. Does that mean there's still room left in the tank in the EU and the US to do such a thing? And then if so, what does that mean for safe haven assets? And how do you prepare yourself for that?
Yeah, the question is Trump going to be pissed that, Japan's allowed to buy their stocks and the U.S. can't? I mean, that's,
Right.
um, Japan's fucked. They have an aging population issue. They have their negative rates. The Bank of Japan is a top 10 shareholder in over 50% of the Nikkei 225, which is Japan's largest index. It's not good. And whenever you look at it, I'm going to pull up the Nikkei 225 chart just because I just like to always show this chart, because this is what happens when you get a really bad boom and bust cycle. And I'm going to just zoom the hell out here. But it's pretty sad. And Japan has never recovered from the 1990 peak. And it's not, they're basically at the halfway point. They're just over it. The index peaked around just below 40,000 at 39,455. And now it's at 21,000 or 21,500. So there are consequences. And for those that think that the U.S. stock market is just going to keep going up for the next decade, it's not going to happen. And the biggest issue is, you have so many people in the U.S., like boomers especially, that are looking to retire that might have a few $1 million in an account. But if stocks go down, just continue to go down for the next decade, those people aren't going to be able to retire. They're not going to be able to afford anything. Same with housing prices. It's all bad. And I had a conversation with some guys today at the bar about it, because they're similar age, they're a little older than me, but one guy's divorced and talking about how he had a house when he was married, but now he doesn't have a house, because it's really hard to afford it. And he was also talking about he was paying $900 a month for student loans up until recently, and now he's paying $770. I was like, I don't even know how you do that, dude. We were just joking about it. That would be you could have pretty much any car you wanted at $900 a month, or save it, whatever you want to do with it. We were just joking about what kind of cars you could have driven, at $900 a month, which is absolutely insane. I don't even want to. Oh God, that's so much money a year, dude. That's
Yeah, I mean,
that's 10 G's a year at least, and
yeah, it's a lot.
yeah,
And when you think about people that are six digits in debt, um,
which is like
you
our
can't,
generation, our whole
right,
generation.
like you can't survive and pay $1,000 a month to pay off your loans. People end up paying the minimum. And from what I understand, college debt is the one thing that isn't like erased from your
Yeah,
whatever. Like if you file for bankruptcy, like you still owe that, right? So it's kind of like a weird debt trap that you have permanently. And there will be a percentage that never make enough to ever pay that back, which really sucks because they were duped into, you know, taking out a huge loan for an education that wasn't going to provide them with the skills necessary to earn a living to pay back that loan. That sucks. It really, really sucks. And yeah,
I mean, the other guy I was talking with, he's 42, and he was like, yeah, my generation. He's like, we were the first ones to be told by our high school guidance counselor, oh yeah, just take the student loan. You don't have to, just do this, and and he's like, it's crazy. I mean, like, it has wrecked a whole generation completely here.
yeah, that's crazy. It was kind of like for when I was graduating high school, like it was you're going to college. It wasn't even you didn't even think twice about it. So I guess the generation before had it a little easier before prices of education got really out of control, and now it's just completely insane.
Oh, it's ridiculous. Like
Yeah,
most schools, even in state, are 20 grand a year, and then when you're talking out of state, it's absurd.
yeah, dude, it's a complete joke. And you know what's going to happen? The generations below us, they're not that dumb. Like they're not going to go. They're going to look and be like, my older brother or my uncle Jimmy fucking got in $200,000 in debt and took out a dumb fucking loan to learn a stupid degree and never paid it back. Like they're going to have examples, a ton of them in their life of people that they know, most likely in their own family, who will have gotten wrecked and they will not make that mistake. Like they're just not that dumb. Um, so I think they're going to be the ones to kind of tell everyone to fuck off. I hope.
Oh yeah, it's
You know, that's just my assumption. That's just my assumption. They're not. They're going to end up being more woke than I think we were, because they're going to have direct access to everything at their fingertips already. Like we were born kind of in that digital age. Like
yeah.
they're really in it. Like
Well, I mean,
really,
think about it.
really in it.
Anyone younger
And
than 10 has just had smartphones at their side their whole life.
right. Yeah, and they're taking a deep dive on the web and they're gonna look for shit that interests them. And that's they want to know. They want to know the truth. Um, I don't know. It's
Yeah.
just interesting to see, the whole. You have negative rates, you have this, you have that, you have things out of control, and we're sitting here shit posting and talking about Bitcoin and the whole thing, and it's wild. It really is wild.
Yeah, as you noted, I think in general for safe haven assets, it lands a interesting topic. But you could say gold, silver, any kind of precious metals, Bitcoin obviously it doesn't have to be said, but it'll be interesting to see where this plays out. In a situation where we hit negative rates and whatever money printing. If the money faucet shuts off, I think we'll definitely see a deflation. I was going to say depression, but obviously depression too, but a deflation across all assets. I include Bitcoin. There's a lot of things. I think it's inevitable. It would be the right way to go around it, because money printing will not solve our issues. It will only make things worse and much, much worse. I've been reading this book, When Money Dies, by Adam Ferguson. It's just mind-boggling that Rudy Havenstein, the the president of the Reichstag Bank from 1908 to 23 or 24 or whatever, they just kept printing money. They didn't think that was the issue. They just thought it was exchange rates. They literally kept printing money, and then it got to the point where like people weren't accepting. They said milliards, which was millions. People weren't accepting like mark notes, paper mark notes for less than like that were less than a milliard, so less than $1 million note. Really, they're $1 million paper mark, whatever. Not $1 million, but $1 million paper mark. And it is mind-boggling. And like people don't realize like if that happens in a day like in a world like today where things are really so connected, prices just could keep going. Like when like this is the 1920s and prices were doubling, tripling, going up all day long. What happens when you have a digitally connected world where exchange rates are getting updated every millisecond? I mean that could.
No, you're absolutely right. It seems like we're much more interconnected now digitally, and with the world reserve currency being the dollar, and things measured against it. I think you've kind of mentioned this before, how we've like exported the inflation to other countries, right? So we don't experience it as much. It's a good point, and I think. I think I put this on my story today, something about like, if you don't think your country can experience hyperinflation, just like think again. It happens. It's unpredictable. It happens suddenly and then all at once. So, that's it. Like that's that. You're just going to have to deal with it when it happens. But, regardless, we'll still be here shit posting, talking about Bitcoin, making memes, and living the dream, talking about it.
I mean, but I just want to keep running this podcast until the global financial system repeats 2008, so we can keep recording, like as shit is really hitting the fan. Kind of fun.
Yeah, it's we're just documenting what we're seeing, and Bitcoin kind of sparked this interest for me, and that's what makes the whole thing really fun. I wouldn't have cared about this otherwise.
Yeah, no, it's. The next 12 months are going to be fun again. This is just it's one of those things again where I'm like, wow, I really look forward to the next 12 months, and I'm just saving my money. That's all I'm doing. I'm just saving my money.
Yep, stacking fiat and stacking sats.
Just saving everything. It's going to be interesting. Like I think even going into as we said, I might have mentioned the podcast. Maybe I mentioned it before I started recording. We're in the second half of the year. It's going to get fun.
Yep.
And
summer's here.
Fun as in bad. So. Well, I just wanted to say thank you everyone for listening, and let CH give off the last of this here.
Yeah, thanks for checking out this episode. This is episode 29 of the Beef and Bitcoin podcast. Make sure to like and subscribe on YouTube. Follow us on Instagram, Twitter. Shoot us a DM. Let us know if you have any feedback. And that's it, man. Leave us a review